Over the weekend at a rally in Pennsylvania, Donald Trump complained about how long it took for prosecutors to indict him for his various crimes, even as Fani Willis, the prosecutor out of Fulton County, Georgia, said it took 2.5 years to properly investigate and that she's preparing to make big decisions. But before we dive into all that, if you haven't yet, please hit that like, subscribe, and the alert bell, and maybe check out my Patreon. I'd appreciate the support. So, Donald Trump, he's complaining as he usually does for a man who supposedly projects a great deal of strength, right? He's just a teller of hard truths. He's not politically correct. He just evinces strength, according to many conservatives. This guy whines and complains and says that he's being bullied and he's a victim. He does this all the time. It's this weird contradiction that many conservatives, and particularly those among his MAGA cult, don't seem to appreciate. So here is, one of his many incoherent, or a segment of his many incoherent rants during a recent rally in Pennsylvania, in which he complains about the length of time it took for quote-unquote Marxist prosecutors to indict him for his various crimes. Take it away, Mr. Former President.
The people. So why didn't the corrupt Marxist prosecutors bring these radical and unjustified charges against me 2.5 years ago? They had 2.5 years. 2.5 years. Nobody even knew they were looking at it. I don't think they were. But they waited 2.5, almost 3 years, so that they could bring him right in the middle of my presidential election, because it's election interference. These are crooked people.
I think it's hilarious, personally, that Donald Trump has the temerity to just bluntly and boldly lie to his constituents that this is election interference. I mean, he is the reigning expert on election interference, given everything that he did from the bully pulpit of the presidency with the White House seal behind him, from the office of the presidency as a sitting president, to try to interfere in the 2020 election, even before the election was really in full swing. So it's hilarious. It's an irony of the highest order. Now, having said that, Donald Trump has been under investigation for most of that time. So, in particular, we're talking about the potential indictments coming out of Fulton County, Georgia. Now, that's not guaranteed, but the reporting seems to indicate that Fani Willis, the district attorney out of Fulton County, Georgia, is indeed going to indict Donald Trump. But again, that's not set in stone. Her investigation began 2.5 years ago. Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis began investigating more than 2 years ago, shortly after a recording was released of a January 2021 phone call Trump made to Georgia Secretary of State. You remember that, right? The perfect phone call. That is much of the predicate of the Fulton County investigation, right? Now, again, the indictment hasn't been made yet. It's possible that it may not be made. So we don't know exactly what charges will be there, but the Associated Press has a great article kind of recapping the probabilistic charges. So we talked about the phone call, the perfect phone call. Guys, I just need you to find 11,780 votes, one more than Biden got. Just a very suspicious and particular number, where he's essentially asking Georgia election officials to just fudge the numbers and find him just enough votes that he needs to win. That's one of the predicates for an investigation. The fake elector scheme. It's hard to remember given Donald Trump's litany of election-related crimes. But as the Associated Press points out, Biden won Georgia by a margin of fewer than 12,000 votes. And apparently there was a scheme. And again, so hard to remember these things, even with somebody who is a politics geek like I am, because it's just, you're talking about the length of time and the number of facets to Donald Trump's attempts to overturn the election. But a committee in a meeting room at the Capitol, 16 prominent Georgia Republicans, a lawmaker, activists, and party officials met to sign a certificate falsely stating that Trump had won and declaring themselves the state's duly elected and qualified electors that would go to the Capitol to provide their ballots to then Vice President Pence to count for the certification. That is an attempt, a pretty naked, brazen attempt to steal the election from Joe Biden. That's the funny thing. Donald Trump said, "Stop the steal," but he was the one engaging or attempting to engage an election theft, not Joe Biden. So that's one aspect, because that's an attempt, fake electors trying to scheme to defraud the American people out of the rightful winner of the 2020 election. It's incredibly unethical, incredibly disgusting, and would be a violation of the law. And then, of course, false claims of election fraud. We don't need to dive into that because you all remember it pretty vividly. Donald Trump was saying for months ahead of the election, during the election, after the election. Here we are 2.5 years later. He's still complaining about it. He is saying without evidence, and actually to evidence to the contrary, that there was widespread election fraud, even though there's absolutely no evidence to support it. Now, the other thing I want to point out here is, again, kind of this I'm going to play a short clip from Fani Willis, again, the Fulton County District Attorney. This is what she has to say about the length of time.
First.
Well, I mean, I've made a commitment to the American people, but most importantly, the citizens of Fulton County, that we were going to be making some big decisions regarding the election investigation, and that I would do that before September the 1st of 2023, and I'm going to hold true to that commitment. The work is accomplished. I mean, we've been working for 2.5 years. We're ready to
First.
So there you go. So straight from her mouth, what she's saying is, listen, it took 2.5 years to properly investigate it, and she's signaling that by September 1st, she will have made a decision to this effect. And again, more than likely she will charge. I would be shocked if she didn't. The last thing I want to say about the Fulton County investigation, and I did a video about this, is Donald Trump and his attorneys attempted to basically get the courts of Georgia to kill this election, to disqualify Fani Willis from prosecuting him, and to basically squash the investigation. And their emphasis for doing so, their reason for doing so, is like, they're like, look, Donald Trump is running for president. This investigation, in addition to other investigations going on, would be an undue burden on him as a candidate. So either kill this investigation, or at the very least, if something's going to happen, it needs to be kicked back until after the November 2024 election. And the judge said no. The judge is basically like, listen, if an investigation constitutes any sort of undue burden, then any defendant could claim that. Like, listen, you can't investigate me because it's an undue burden. And the judge is basically making the case that Trump's attorneys failed to actually make a credible argument that this is a serious challenge. Having reviewed the pleadings, the court now finds that neither Trump nor Latham enjoys standing to mount a challenge at this pre-indictment phase of proceedings to the continued investigation into and potential prosecution of possible criminal interference in the 2020 general election. The movement's asserted injuries that would open the doors of the courthouse to their claims are either insufficient or else speculative and unrealized. They are insufficient because, while being the subject or even target of a highly publicized criminal investigation is likely an unwelcome and unpleasant experience, no court has ever held that the status alone provides a basis for the court to interfere or halt the investigation. Like, listen, this might be bad for you reputationally, this might be inconvenient for you, but that's not a basis for the court to kill an investigation, especially when there's a lawful and reasonable predicate to that investigation. So that's bad news for Donald Trump. It's great news for democracy, and I don't know about you, but as much as I don't like to rush ahead in time, part of me can't wait for September 1st. Because, again, more than likely, this will be another major indictment against Donald Trump, and that's bad news for him and good news for the rest of us.